The courtroom stretched across half a kilometer of polished metal and glowing displays. Daniel stood in the center of a circular platform, surrounded by holographic images that showed burning colonies and dying aliens. Above him, 12 judges from 12 different species sat in elevated chairs, looking down at the human who wore the dark blue uniform of Earth's defense fleet. Supreme Arbiter occupied the highest seat. His species, resembled massive bears with 6 arms and gray skin that looked like stone. He leaned forward, his 4 red eyes focused on Daniel with something that looked like amusement. "Commander," said, his voice echoing through translation devices that made it sound like thunder. "You are charged with the murder of 20,000 citizens across 3 mining colonies. How do you answer?" Daniel kept his voice steady. "I destroyed 3 military installations that were using slave labor. They are lying about what those colonies were." Several judges made sounds that the translators rendered as laughter, raised one of his hands for silence. "The evidence is clear, human. We have sensor logs from 17 different ships. We have testimony from survivors. We have debris analysis showing your weapons' signatures. What you believe is irrelevant. What we can prove is all that matters." "Then let me present my evidence," Daniel said. "Let me show you what I found before I attacked those colonies." "No," said simply. "The tribunal has reviewed all necessary evidence. We do not waste time on desperate claims from the accused." Daniel's jaw tightened. "That's not how justice works." "It is how the Galactic Tribunal works," replied. "Your species is new here, Commander. You do not understand how law functions on this scale. We judge based on facts, not feelings. The facts say you killed 20,000 beings. Nothing else matters." In the gallery behind the judges, Daniel could see Ambassador Lisa Grant from Earth's diplomatic corps. She looked worried but said nothing. The rules forbade her from speaking during the trial. "On Earth," Daniel said, "we believe the accused has the right to defend themselves. We believe evidence must be examined by both sides. We believe in something called due process." Laughed a deep rumbling sound. "Due process. Yes, we have heard of this Earth concept. It is very touching that your species cares so much about fairness. But fairness is a luxury for planets with one government and one set of laws. In a galaxy with thousands of species, we cannot afford such sentiment. We must be efficient." "Efficient," Daniel repeated. "You call this efficient? You won't even listen to what I have to say." "We have listened," said. "You claim you acted in defense of others. You claim the colonies were military targets. These claims are noted in the record, but they change nothing. The evidence proves you destroyed 3 colonies and killed their inhabitants. Whether they were military or civilian, whether they used slave labor or not, the result is the same. You killed them. That is murder under galactic law." One of the other judges, a being that looked like a floating crystal cluster, spoke up. "The human legal system sounds inefficient, Supreme Arbiter. How can justice be served if every criminal is allowed to present their own version of events?" "Indeed," said. "Imagine the chaos if we allowed every accused being to demand investigations and present contradictory evidence. Trials would take years. Criminals would escape punishment while we debated details. No, our system is superior. The prosecution presents evidence. The tribunal evaluates it. A vote is taken. Justice is swift and certain." Daniel looked at each of the 12 judges in turn. "What about mistakes? What if you're wrong?" "We are rarely wrong," said. "The tribunal has existed for 4,000 years. We have judged millions of cases. Our accuracy rate exceeds 98%. "What about the 2%? Daniel asked. His expression hardened. "Acceptable losses for the sake of galactic stability. Some errors are inevitable in any system. The question is whether perfect justice or functional justice better serves civilization. We choose function over philosophy." From a side entrance, a woman in a gray suit entered the courtroom. Price, Daniel's attorney, carried a data pad and looked frustrated. She had been arguing with tribunal officials for 3 days, trying to get them to accept Earth standards of evidence. She had failed. "Commander," continued, "your attorney has requested several accommodations based on Earth law. She asked for the right to cross-examine witnesses. She asked for independent investigation of the crime scene. She asked to present expert testimony about weapon signatures. Do you understand why these requests were rejected?" "Because you're afraid of what we might prove," Daniel said. "No," said, his voice sharp now. "Because they are irrelevant to galactic law. Your species must learn that being part of this community means accepting our rules. You cannot impose your values on thousands of other civilizations simply because you believe your way is better. Stepped closer to the platform. Supreme Arbiter, I respectfully request a recess to review the prosecution's evidence more thoroughly. Request, said without looking at her. The tribunal has scheduled this case for 3 days. We are now on day 3. The vote will be taken within the hour. But we haven't had adequate time to prepare a defense, protested. You have had as much time as galactic law allows, said. If you wished for more time, you should have filed your request 6 months ago according to proper procedure. We didn't know about the trial 6 months ago, said. Commander was arrested 4 days ago. Then you should work faster, said. Several judges made sounds that translated as agreement or approval. Daniel watched the exchange and felt his anger building. He had served Earth's military for 15 years. He had protected colonies, stopped pirates, and saved lives. When the distress signal came from inside those mining operations, he had investigated first. He had seen the children working in toxic environments. He had seen the mass graves where sick workers were dumped. He had tried to contact authorities, but they had ignored every message. So he had acted. He had destroyed 3 facilities that were torturing thousands of enslaved beings. He had saved 17 different species from death. And now he was being called a murderer by judges who refused to hear the truth. The tribunal will now vote, announced. All in favor of conviction indicate your position. 8 lights appeared above 8 judges' seats. 4 remained dark. Commander Daniel, you are found guilty of murder, declared. The sentence is death by execution, to be carried out in 3 days. Additionally, Earth will pay reparations of 40 trillion credits to the government for damages and lost lives. The courtroom erupted in noise. Ambassador Grant stood up, shouting objections, rushed toward the platform demanding to appeal, but raised all 6 of his arms and silence fell. There is no appeal in the Galactic Tribunal, he said. Our judgment is final. Take the prisoner to his cell. Guards approached Daniel from both sides. They were a species that stood nearly 3 meters tall and had skin like metal plates. They reached for his arms. Before they could touch him, Daniel turned to look directly at. You think Earth's laws are philosophical exercises with no real power. You think justice is just about who has the most evidence and the biggest army. But you're wrong about something important. And what is that? Asked Sounding Board. Daniel smiled, and there was no humor in it. The truth doesn't care about your votes. Physics doesn't care about your laws, and humans don't care about your opinions when we know we're right. Brave words from a condemned being, said. Take him away. As the guards led Daniel toward the exit, he looked back at one more time. She met his eyes, and he saw the determination there. She was not giving up. Neither was he. Price sat in her quarters aboard the tribunal station, surrounded by holographic displays that showed evidence from the trial. She had been awake for 36 hours, reviewing every piece of data the prosecution presented. Something was wrong. She could feel it, but she needed to prove it. The weapon signatures bothered her most. According to the evidence, the plasma cannons that destroyed the colonies matched Earth's military hardware almost perfectly, but had worked on defense cases before. She knew how precise weapon signatures were. They were like fingerprints, unique to each manufacturer and impossible to fake. Almost impossible, she corrected herself. She pulled up the detailed analysis of the energy dispersal patterns. Human plasma weapons used a specific containment field geometry that left distinctive traces. The evidence showed these traces clearly, but something was off by a tiny amount, 0.03% deviation in the decay rate. That should not exist. Weapons were calibrated to exact specifications. Even old or damaged weapons maintained their signature characteristics. A 0.3% deviation suggested either the sensors were faulty or someone had altered the data. Opened a secure communication channel to Earth. The message would take 6 minutes to reach home and 6 minutes for a response to return. She used the time to prepare her questions. When Doctor's face appeared on the screen, he looked tired. It was the middle of the night in Geneva, where Earth's primary research facilities operated. He said, I heard about the verdict, I'm sorry. Don't be sorry yet, she replied. I need your help with something. I'm sending you weapon signature data from the trial. Tell me what you see. She transmitted the files and waited. Was one of Earth's top physicists, specializing in energy weapons and field dynamics. If anyone could spot problems in the evidence, it was him. 6 minutes later, his response came through. "Where did you get this data?" From the prosecution said, "Why?" Another 6-minute wait. Then's expression on the screen turned serious. "Because these signatures are fake. Look at the isotope traces in the plasma residue. Real human weapons leave specific decay patterns based on our fuel mixture. These patterns match our weapons in most ways, but the decay rate is slightly wrong. Someone created these signatures artificially." Felt her heart rate increase? "You're sure?" "Absolutely," replied after the delay. "Plasma weapons don't work like this. The containment fields create deterministic patterns. You can't have a 99.7% match with a deviation. It's like finding a fingerprint that's almost yours but has one ridge different. It doesn't happen naturally." "Could the sensors be wrong?" asked. 6 minutes. "No. These readings came from multiple independent sources. The observers, even neutral parties. They all recorded the same data, which means the signatures themselves were engineered to look like human weapons while actually being something else." His mind raced. If the weapons were faked, then everything about the prosecution's case was built on lies. But why would they destroy their own colonies? She accessed another set of files that the tribunal had classified as irrelevant to the case. These were the distress signals Daniel claimed to have received before the attack. The tribunal said the signals were fabricated, but wanted to see them herself. It took her 4 hours to decrypt the data. When she finally opened the files, what she saw made her feel sick. The signals were real. They came from inside the mining colonies, transmitted on emergency frequencies used by dozens of different species. The messages were desperate pleas for help, sent by people who knew they were about to die. Children asking someone to save them. Adults begging for rescue before they were executed. The colonies were not mining operations. They were slave labor camps. Found shipping records buried in the data. They had been bringing in populations from conquered worlds and forcing them to work in hazardous conditions. When workers became too sick or old to be useful, they were killed. The 3 colonies Daniel destroyed held over 30,000 enslaved beings, not the 20,000 civilian the prosecution claimed. More importantly, they had known Daniel was investigating. They had monitoring systems that detected his ship when he started scanning the colonies. They had moved quickly, destroying key evidence and preparing to evacuate the camps before anyone could gather proof. But Daniel had moved faster. He had struck the colonies before they could cover their tracks. He had not killed 20,000 civilians. He had destroyed 3 military installations that were committing genocide. Needed more. She needed to understand why the tribunal was supporting the lies. She began researching his history, looking at previous cases he had judged. What she found shocked her. Over the past 10 years had presided over 43 major cases. In every single one, the defendant was found guilty. In every single one, the convicted party belonged to a species that later suffered political or economic consequences. Trade sanctions, territory disputes, military restrictions. The pattern was clear. The Galactic Tribunal was not about justice. It was a tool for powerful species to eliminate rivals through legal means. Found a case from 6 years earlier. A merchant captain had been accused of smuggling illegal weapons. The evidence was strong, the verdict was guilty, and the captain was executed. Afterward, the collective faced massive sanctions that crippled their economy for years. But buried in the case files, found something interesting. A junior investigator had flagged inconsistencies in the evidence. He noted that the weapons found on the ship did not match the purchase records. He suggested the weapons might have been planted. His report was marked as irrelevant and never presented at trial. That investigator had died in a shuttle accident 3 months after the trial ended. Found similar patterns in other cases. Evidence that contradicted the prosecution was dismissed. Witnesses who might help the defense disappeared. Investigators who asked too many questions suffered convenient accidents. The system was not just biased, it was actively corrupt. She tried to request an emergency hearing, following the procedures outlined in galactic law. The request was within minutes. She appealed to individual judges, asking them to review the new evidence privately. All 12 refused. Finally, she went directly to his office. The Supreme Arbiter met with her for exactly 5 minutes. "Your client is guilty," he said, not looking up from his work. Accept it and move on. The evidence was fabricated, said. The colonies were slave camps, they are lying. That is irrelevant, replied. The verdict has been rendered, it cannot be changed. Even if an innocent being is executed. Finally looked at her. His 4 red eyes showed no emotion. Commander killed 20,000 beings, whether they were civilians or slaves, whether his intentions were noble or not, the act itself is murder. Intent does not matter. Results matter. He is guilty under galactic law. That's not justice, said. No, agreed. It is order. Justice is a luxury your species obsesses over because you have never truly faced the chaos of ruling thousands of different civilizations. Out here in the real galaxy, we cannot afford philosophical debates. We need clear rules and swift enforcement. Your commander broke our rules. He must face the consequences. What about the truth? Demanded. Smiled, showing teeth that looked like broken glass. The truth is whatever the tribunal decides it is. That is how power works, human. The strong judge the weak. Always have, always will. Your species will learn this lesson eventually, assuming you survive long enough. Left his office knowing she had lost the legal battle. The tribunal would never admit its corruption. They had too much invested in maintaining their authority. But she had not lost the war. She had evidence that proved Daniel's innocence. She had proof of tribunal corruption. She just needed a way to force the galaxy to see it. She went to the detention center where Daniel was being held. The guards let her through after checking her credentials. She found him sitting calmly in his cell, meditating. I know the truth, she told him through the transparent barrier. The colonies were slave camps. The weapon signatures were faked. The tribunal is protecting them because they're part of the same corrupt system. Daniel opened his eyes. Can you prove it? Yes, but won't let me present it. He says the verdict is final. Then we don't go through him, Daniel said. We go around him. How? Daniel smiled. Remember what I said in the courtroom? About truth and physics not caring about their votes. I meant it. The tribunal thinks they control information. They think their authority is absolute. But there's one thing they don't understand about humans. What's that? Asked. We don't ask permission to do what's right, Daniel said. We have evidence that can't be disputed. We have proof they can't suppress. We just need to make sure everyone sees it at once, so fast they can't stop us. That's impossible, said. The tribunal controls all communications on this station. They monitor every transmission. I know, Daniel said. That's why we're not going to use their systems. We're going to use something they don't even know exists. He stood up and walked closer to the barrier. There's something about humanity that we've kept secret, something we discovered 20 years ago that changes everything. The galaxy thinks they understand physics. They think they know what's possible. They're wrong. What are you talking about? Asked. The courtroom filled with representatives from across the galaxy as Daniel was brought in for his final sentencing. Had used an obscure legal provision to force 1 hour of evidentiary presentation before the execution. Had approved it with visible irritation, confident that nothing could change the outcome. Daniel stood in the center platform, his hands bound but his expression calm. Positioned herself near the evidence console, her data pad ready. In the gallery, dozens of species watched with curiosity or indifference. Another criminal receiving justice. Another day in the tribunal. You have 1 hour, announced. Use it wisely, human. Began her presentation. She displayed the weapon's signature analysis on the central hologram, making it large enough for everyone to see clearly. These are the energy patterns attributed to human plasma weapons. The prosecution claims they prove Commander destroyed the colonies. She zoomed in on specific data points. But look at the isotope decay rates. Human weapons create plasma using a fusion process with specific byproducts. These byproducts decay at predictable rates based on the laws of physics. The readings from the colony sites match human weapons in 99.7% of characteristics. Several judges leaned forward, studying the data, looked bored. The problem, continued, is the 0.3% that doesn't match. Plasma weapon signatures are deterministic. They follow physical laws that cannot be violated. Having a near-perfect match with a small deviation is physically impossible unless someone artificially created these signatures. She brought up a comparison chart. On the left, you see actual human weapon residue from controlled tests. On the right, the residue from the colonies. Notice the difference in the helium-3 decay curve. This deviation cannot occur naturally. One of the judges, a crystalline being named, spoke up. Are you suggesting the evidence? I'm not suggesting, said. I'm proving. These weapon signatures were manufactured to look like human technology while actually being military hardware. Waved a hand dismissively. Even if true, it proves nothing. The weapons still destroyed the colonies. Someone fired them. You're right, said. Someone did to themselves. She changed the display to show the distress signals Daniel had received. The audio played through the courtroom, desperate voices in dozens of languages begging for help. Children crying, adults pleading. These signals came from inside the colonies before Commander attacked. The tribunal classified them as irrelevant, but I've their authenticity. They're real. She showed shipping manifests next, detailing the movement of captured populations to the colony sites. The colonies were not civilian mining operations. They were slave labor camps holding over 30,000 beings from 17 conquered species. The courtroom erupted in noise. Several representatives stood up, demanding explanations, raised his hands for silence, but the disruption continued for several minutes. The new commander was investigating, continued over the noise. They detected his scans. They began destroying evidence and preparing to evacuate the camps, but Commander acted first, destroying the facilities before they could cover up their crimes. She displayed images smuggled from the sites, showing the terrible conditions, the mass graves, the children working in toxic environments. The gallery grew quiet as the reality became undeniable. So you see, said, Commander didn't commit murder, he stopped genocide. He saved thousands of lives. They destroyed their own colonies to eliminate witnesses, then framed humanity for the crime. Stood up, his massive form towering over the courtroom. You have presented interesting theories, human, but theories are not proof. You have data that could be interpreted multiple ways. You have images that could be. You have nothing that definitively proves your claims. Then let me present one more piece of evidence, said. Commander received permission from his superiors to investigate the colonies based on the distress signals. His actions were authorized and justified under rules of military engagement. I have the communication logs proving this. Communications can be fabricated, said. Just as images can be altered and data can be manipulated, the tribunal finds your evidence unconvincing. The verdict stands. The execution will proceed in 1 hour. Looked at Daniel. He gave her a small nod. This was the moment. Then I suppose we'll have to do this the hard way, Daniel said quietly. Every sensor in the courtroom began registering anomalous readings. Energy signatures appeared that matched no known technology. The artificial gravity fluctuated, making several beings grab their seats for stability. Communication systems crackled with interference. Looked around in confusion. What is happening? Daniel closed his eyes and concentrated. The chains binding his wrists began to vibrate, then simply fell apart, the molecular bonds breaking down without any physical force. Objects throughout the courtroom started to move, floating gently as if gravity had become optional in localized areas. What is this? Demanded. What are you doing? Something your scientists will have trouble explaining, Daniel said. He raised his hand, and a small sphere of pure energy formed above his palm. It rotated slowly, defying every law of thermodynamics by generating more energy than it consumed. The judges stared in shock. Physicists in the gallery pulled out instruments, trying to measure what they were seeing. The readings made no sense. 20 years ago, Daniel explained, his voice calm, humanity discovered something while exploring deep space. We found that consciousness at certain frequencies can interact with quantum probability fields, not through technology, not through genetic modification, but through natural human capability that we learned to train and develop. He gestured, and the energy sphere split into dozens of smaller lights that danced through the air. I'm not using hidden devices or alien technology. I'm directly influencing quantum probability, making extremely unlikely events become reality. Your sensors register it as impossible because they measure the wrong variables. His 4 eyes widened. That violates the laws of physics. No, Daniel said. It operates at a level beneath what your physics measures. Quantum probability exists in every particle, every energy field, every interaction. Most beings cannot access it consciously. but humans can with proper training. He concentrated again, and suddenly every holographic display in the courtroom activated at once. They showed files pulled directly from the tribunal's own classified databases. Case after case where evidence was suppressed, where witnesses disappeared, where innocent beings were convicted for political purposes. "What I'm doing right now is reaching into your computer systems," Daniel said. "Not by hacking them, by directly influencing the quantum states of your storage media. Every security measure you have is designed to stop conventional intrusion. None of them account for someone who can alter probability at the fundamental level." The displays continued showing evidence, faster now. 43 cases presided over by, all showing patterns of corruption. Communications between judges and powerful species, coordinating verdicts for political gain. Financial records proving bribes and favors exchanged. "Stop this immediately," shouted. "Guards, restrain him." Security forces rushed toward Daniel from all sides. They raised their weapons, energy rifles designed to stun or kill. But when they pulled the triggers, nothing happened. The weapons simply failed to fire. "I'm not breaking your weapons," Daniel said. "I'm just making it extremely unlikely that the firing mechanisms will activate in my presence. Probability manipulation. Everything in the universe runs on probability at the quantum level. I'm just adjusting the odds." He spread his arms, and the quantum field expanded throughout the entire courtroom level. More displays activated, more evidence emerged. Communications to every species embassy throughout the station and beyond. The truth broadcasting simultaneously to hundreds of worlds. "You wanted proof that couldn't be disputed," Daniel said, looking at. "Here it is. Everything your tribunal has hidden, every case you've corrupted, every life you've destroyed for political convenience. All of it extracted directly from your own records using methods you don't understand and can't stop." His expression shifted from anger to fear. "This is illegal. This is assault on galactic institutions." "Is it?" Daniel asked. "I'm not attacking anyone. I'm not destroying anything. I'm simply making information public. Information that proves your entire system is corrupt. Information that proves I was right about those colonies." Use the chaos to upload all her evidence to the same broadcasting network Daniel had opened. The weapon analysis, the distress signals, the slave camp documentation. Everything flowing out to the galaxy at once, too fast for the tribunal to intercept or censor. "You said truth is whatever the tribunal decides," Daniel continued. "You said power determines justice. Well, Supreme Arbiter, let me show you what real power looks like. Not the power to suppress evidence or execute the innocent, but the power to make truth impossible to ignore." The quantum field pulsed with energy that made the air shimmer. Daniel stood motionless in the center of the courtroom, maintaining his concentration while evidence continued broadcasting across the galaxy. 6 hours had passed since he began his demonstration, and he showed no signs of stopping. Had tried everything. He ordered evacuation, but Daniel extended his field to cover all exits from the courtroom level. No one could leave. He called for military intervention, but the station's defense systems failed to activate in Daniel's presence. He attempted to shut down the power grid, but the quantum manipulation kept everything running independently. Now the Supreme Arbiter sat in his elevated chair, watching his career crumble in real time as the galaxy learned the truth about the tribunal he led. Reports flooded in from across known space. The Al Sovereignty had recalled their ambassador after learning their previous representative was convicted on planted evidence. The collective demanded refunds for the trillion credits they paid in false reparations. The Empire, longtime supporters of the tribunal, issued a statement questioning the legitimacy of 12 cases involving their citizens. In the courtroom gallery, representatives from hundreds of species argued among themselves. Some defended the tribunal, claiming the exposed evidence was fabricated by human technology. Others demanded immediate reforms. The unity that once defined the Galactic Tribunal shattered before everyone's eyes. Worked at her console, organizing the data flowing from Daniel's quantum link to the tribunal databases. She created indexed files showing patterns of corruption spanning decades. Case numbers, judge names, species involved, political outcomes. The documentation was overwhelming and undeniable. One of the judges, a being called who resembled a mass of tentacles with crystalline nodes, broke the tense silence. "Supreme Arbiter, we must address this situation." The evidence being broadcast is damaging to the tribunal's credibility. The evidence is, insisted. The human is using unknown technology to manipulate our systems. Then explain how he's doing it, another judge challenged. Our best scientists cannot identify his method. Our security cannot stop him. If this is technology, it's beyond anything in recorded galactic history. It's not technology, Daniel said, his voice carrying clearly through the silent courtroom. I've explained what I'm doing. I'm manipulating quantum probability through trained consciousness. Every human has this latent ability. We've just learned to develop it. A representative stood up in the gallery, his reptilian face twisted with anger. This is an attack on galactic peace. The human should be killed immediately for this aggression. I'm not attacking anyone, Daniel replied. I'm defending myself by revealing the truth. Your government destroyed 3 slave labor camps, murdered thousands of witnesses, and framed my species for the crime. The evidence is in your own records. Everyone can see it now. Lies, they shouted. The colonies were legitimate mining operations. Pulled up specific files and displayed them for all to see. These are shipping manifests from your own government, detailing the transport of enslaved populations. These are construction records showing the camps were designed for maximum labor efficiency with minimal life support. These are execution orders signed by officials. The representative tried to speak, but other voices drowned him out. Species whose citizens had been enslaved in those camps demanded answers. The evidence was too specific, too detailed to dismiss. His 4 eyes closed briefly. When he opened them, he looked older somehow, tired in a way that transcended physical exhaustion. Even if the evidence was false, it does not excuse your actions, Commander. You still destroyed 3 facilities without proper authorization from galactic authorities. I had authorization from my own chain of command, Daniel said. And I had evidence of ongoing genocide. Was I supposed to file a request with the tribunal and wait 6 months while thousands more beings died? Yes, said simply. That is how civilized species handle such situations, through proper channels, through law. Through a corrupt system that would have buried the evidence and let the genocide continue, Daniel countered. Your tribunal has presided over 43 major cases in the past decade. Every single defendant was convicted. Every single case benefited powerful political interests. You're not administering justice. You're maintaining a power structure that allows atrocities to happen. The crystalline judge spoke carefully. Supreme Arbiter, the pattern is concerning. Perhaps we should review our procedures. Our procedures are sound, snapped. They have served the galaxy for 4,000 years. Have they? Asked. She displayed another set of files. These are records from the tribunal's early history. 2,000 years ago, you had different rules. Defendants could present evidence. Independent investigations were mandatory. Cross-examination was standard. Somewhere along the way, you changed. You became more efficient, more streamlined, but you also became more corrupt. She showed voting records from ancient cases, where verdicts were split or even acquitted defendants. In the first 1,000 years of tribunal history, the conviction rate was 62%. In the past 200 years, it's 98%. Either criminals got much more obvious, or the system got much less interested in actual guilt. The gallery erupted in discussion again. Several judges looked uncomfortable as their own voting records appeared on the displays. Cases where they had voted to convict despite questionable evidence. Cases where they had dismissed valid defense arguments. His tentacles writhed in what translated as distress. I did not realize the extent of these patterns. I thought I was serving justice. You were serving convenience, Daniel said, his voice not unkind. It's easier to convict everyone than to admit some cases are complicated. It's easier to support powerful governments than to challenge them. It's easier to maintain stability than to pursue truth. But easy isn't the same as right. Stood abruptly, his massive form trembling with rage. You dare lecture me about right and wrong? You who killed thousands. I saved thousands, Daniel corrected. And I'm willing to prove it. Release the survivors from the camps, bring them here, let them testify about what they did, let the galaxy hear their voices. Impossible, said. The survivors are in custody, we cannot compel them to testify. Because they would tell the truth, said. They would confirm everything we've shown, that's why they are keeping them isolated. Daniel shifted his concentration, and new displays activated showing current detention facilities. The survivors are being held in isolation centers, cut off from communication. The government claims they're receiving medical treatment, but the facilities are actually prisons designed to keep witnesses silent. He zoomed in on specific locations. 17 different species represented, 3,247 beings who can testify about the slave camps, all locked away where no one can hear them. A representative from the Confederation stood up. My species lost 600 citizens in raids 3 years ago. We thought they were dead. Are you saying some might be in those camps? Yes, Daniel said. He displayed a list of names and species. They took prisoners from 42 different raids over 5 years. They used them as labor until they died or became too weak to work. Commander freed the survivors when he destroyed the camps. The courtroom descended into chaos. Representatives rushed to check the lists for their missing citizens. Accusations flew at the delegation. Guards struggled to maintain order as decades of hidden crimes came to light. Through it all, Daniel maintained his quantum field, keeping the evidence flowing, making it impossible for anyone to claim ignorance. His face showed the strain of concentration, but his resolve never wavered. Watch the dissolution of everything he had built. His authority, his reputation, his carefully constructed system of control. All of it crumbling because one human refused to accept injustice. "What do you want?" he finally asked, his voice barely audible over the noise. Daniel looked at him directly. "I want what humans have always wanted: truth, justice, recognition that every being, regardless of power or species, deserves fair treatment under law. I want you to admit that your system is broken and needs to change. And if I refuse, then I keep broadcasting evidence until every species in the galaxy sees what the tribunal really is, until no one trusts your judgments, until the system collapses under the weight of its own corruption." Daniel's expression was hard. "I can maintain this field for days if necessary. I've trained for situations exactly like this. How long can you maintain your denial?" Looked around at the 12 judges, at the angry representatives, at the displays showing crime after crime committed under his authority. He had spent 4,000 years building power. It took 6 hours for a human to destroy it. "The tribunal will recess," he said quietly, "for deliberation." "No recess," Daniel said. "You deliberate here in front of everyone. No more closed sessions. No more secret. The judges deliberated for 3 hours while the galaxy watched. Every word spoken in the courtroom was broadcast through the quantum field Daniel maintained. No secrets, no private negotiations. Every species with communication technology heard the discussion. Some judges tried to defend the existing system. They argued that perfection was impossible and that the tribunal did more good than harm overall. Others acknowledged the corruption, but claimed it was limited to a few cases. Remained silent for most of the debate, simply displaying case files that contradicted every defense offered. Was the first to break ranks completely. "I have reviewed my own voting record," the tentacled being said, "and I am ashamed. I convicted beings based on insufficient evidence. I dismissed valid defenses because they were inconvenient. I served political interests instead of truth. I cannot defend these actions." One by one, other judges admitted similar failures. They had trusted the system without questioning it. They had assumed guidance was sound. They had prioritized efficiency and stability over justice. Sat in his elevated chair, listening to his counsel disintegrate. His 4 eyes watched Daniel, who remained standing in the center platform, maintaining the impossible field that exposed everything. "You have one human," finally said. "Are you satisfied?" "This isn't about winning," Daniel replied. "It's about fixing a broken system, about making sure what happened to me doesn't happen to others." "Very noble," said his voice bitter. "But you cannot maintain that field forever. Eventually you will tire, and when you do, we will shut down your broadcasts and restore order." "Maybe," Daniel admitted. "But by then, billions of beings will know the truth. You can suppress information from some people some of the time. You cannot suppress it from everyone forever. The galaxy has seen your corruption. That knowledge won't disappear just because I stop broadcasting." Stepped forward, addressing the entire tribunal. "Commander isn't asking you to abandon authority. He's asking you to use it responsibly. Implement real protections for the accused. Allow independent investigations. Create oversight mechanisms that prevent corruption. These aren't radical ideas, they're basic principles that make justice possible. And if we refuse, asked, then Earth will refuse to recognize tribunal judgments, said. Other species will follow our lead. You'll become irrelevant, a relic of a corrupt age that the galaxy moved past. But if you reform, if you actually try to create a fair system, Earth will support you. We'll share our legal knowledge. We'll help train new judges. We'll work with you to build something better. The offer hung in the air, could feel the weight of thousands of years of tradition pressing against the undeniable reality of present corruption. He had spent his life believing that power and order mattered more than abstract ideals. The human in front of him proved that ideals backed by capability could topple any throne. The tribunal will vote, said heavily, all in favor of nullifying Commander's conviction based on evidence. 12 lights appeared above 12 judges' seats, unanimous. All in favor of formally acknowledging tribunal corruption and implementing reforms. 11 lights appeared, only seat remained dark. He looked at the results and closed his eyes. When he opened them, a 12th light joined the others. The motion carries, he said quietly. Commander Daniel, your conviction is with full apology from this body. The government will be charged with genocide, evidence tampering, and false testimony. Reparations will be paid to survivor species, not to Earth. This tribunal recognizes your actions as justified intervention in ongoing atrocities. The courtroom erupted in sound, but raised his hands for silence one final time. Furthermore, he continued, this tribunal acknowledges systemic failures in its procedures and judgment. Effective immediately, we will implement the following reforms based on legal principles from Earth jurisprudence. 1. All accused beings will have the right to present evidence in their defense. 2. Independent investigations will be mandatory before trial. 3. Cross-examination of witnesses will be permitted. 4. Verdicts must be supported by clear evidence beyond reasonable doubt. 5. An independent oversight council will review all cases for procedural fairness. He looked directly at Daniel. These reforms will be named the protocols in recognition of the human who forced us to confront our failures. They will be implemented within 6 standard months across all tribunal operations. Daniel finally released the quantum field. The shimmer in the air faded, and normal gravity returned to the courtroom. He swayed slightly from exhaustion but remained standing. One more thing, he said. The detention facilities holding survivors, they need to be inspected immediately by neutral parties. Those beings have been prisoners long enough. Agreed, said. Multi-species inspection teams will be dispatched within 24 hours. The Supreme Arbiter stood, and for a moment, he and Daniel looked at each other across the courtroom. One was an ancient being who had ruled for decades through power and control. The other was a human who had toppled that rule in hours through truth and determination. I underestimated your species, admitted. I thought Earth's focus on fairness was weakness. I see now it is a different kind of strength. Principles are only weak if you abandon them when they become difficult, Daniel said. That's the difference between our approaches. You served convenience, we serve justice. And justice, when backed by the will to defend it, always wins eventually. Nodded slowly. I will resign from my position effective immediately. The tribunal needs new leadership to implement these reforms, leadership that believes in them. He descended from his elevated chair for the last time. As he passed Daniel, he paused. Your quantum ability, how many humans possess it? Every human has the potential, Daniel said, but it requires years of training and mental discipline. Right now, maybe 10,000 humans can use it at my level. In another generation, probably millions. And you kept this secret from the galaxy. We learned early in our history that showing too much capability too fast makes others afraid, Daniel explained. The galaxy needed to see humans as principled before they saw us as powerful. Otherwise, they would have viewed us as a threat to be eliminated rather than allies to be welcomed. Wise acknowledged. Perhaps that is the real difference between your species and mine. You think in generations, we think in immediate terms. He left the courtroom, his political career ended but his life preserved. Other judges would face investigations for their roles in specific cases of corruption. Some would lose their positions. Others would help implement the new system as penance for their past failures. Over the following weeks, Daniel worked with tribunal reformers to establish the protocols. Species from across the galaxy sent legal experts to help develop fair procedures that could work for thousands of different cultures and value systems. The government fell apart as the extent of their crimes became public. 17 species demanded justice for their enslaved citizens. The survivors from the camps provided testimony that led to prosecutions of hundreds of officials. The species who had suffered under false tribunal judgments received compensation and formal apologies. Earth received commendations from over 200 civilizations for exposing the corruption. More importantly, they received invitations to participate in galactic governance. Human observers joined reformed judicial bodies throughout known space. Earth's legal philosophy influenced the development of new protective standards for accused beings galaxy-wide. Daniel visited the rehabilitation centers established for freed survivors. He met children who had spent years in camps, who had faced death every day, who were now learning to be children again. They thanked him for saving them. He told them they saved themselves by having the courage to send those distress signals. A young girl, barely 10 years old, asked him how he defeated the most powerful judge in the galaxy. Daniel knelt down to her level. "I didn't defeat him. I just made it impossible for him to ignore the truth. That's all justice really needs. Truth, spoken so clearly and loudly that even those who benefit from lies have to acknowledge it." "Is that your quantum power?" the girl asked, "making people hear the truth?" "No," Daniel smiled. "That's a human power. The quantum ability just helped get everyone's attention. But any being from any species can speak truth. You just have to be brave enough to say it when others want you to stay silent." The girl thought about this, then nodded seriously. "I will remember that." Daniel stood and looked around at the survivors beginning new lives. These beings owed their freedom to evidence that could not be suppressed, to principles that would not bend, to justice that finally mattered more than politics. The galaxy had learned that truth doesn't need permission to exist. It just needs someone willing to defend it. And humanity, stubborn and principled and impossibly determined, had shown that they would always be willing to stand for what was right, regardless of the cost. That was the real power Earth brought to the stars. Not quantum manipulation, not superior technology, but the unwavering belief that every being deserves justice and the courage to fight for that justice even against impossible odds. The throne had fallen, truth had prevailed, and the galaxy would never be quite the same. "If you're going to decide my fate and the fate of this system, the galaxy deserves to watch." He maintained the quantum field, holding it steady even as tribunal security tried everything to stop him. Energy dampeners failed. Stasis fields collapsed. Physical barriers became irrelevant as he simply altered the probability of matter occupying specific spaces. "This field will remain active," Daniel said, "until you acknowledge what everyone in this galaxy is now seeing, until you admit that your tribunal is corrupt, until you accept that justice requires truth, not just authority." Looked around the courtroom at the displays showing his crimes, at the representatives from hundreds of species watching in shock, at the security forces whose weapons refused to function. For the first time in his long career, the Supreme Arbiter had no control. And Daniel, the human he had sentenced to death, stood calmly in the center of it all, doing the impossible. Daniel's expression became serious. "Tomorrow, when I'm brought to the courtroom for sentencing, I'm going to show the tribunal exactly how wrong they are about humans, and you're going to broadcast the evidence while they're too busy staring at me to stop you." "Daniel, what are you planning?" "Something impossible," he said. "Something that will prove the truth doesn't need their permission to be heard." They had 3 days to prove the impossible, 3 days to expose the lies, 3 days to show the galaxy that Earth's laws were not just philosophy. 3 days to break a system that had stood for 4,000 years.